And welcome to another episode of The Conversation Live. The Conversation Live focuses on social justice, restorative justice, inclusion, and equality. We're live here today for more piercing and provocative conversation. My guest today is Shaun Szameit. Shaun is a cannabis industry entrepreneur. He's also been in the media a great deal the last few months, last few years. I want to talk with Shaun to unpack his story and learn a little bit more about some of the challenges he has had. We'll look at social equity. Has Shaun been persecuted, or is he being over-prosecuted? Shaun, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Shaun. So I want to jump straight into it because, you know, I don't think I've had a guest on before that I've Googled and filled up 3 or 4 pages of information, search engine-wise. You've been in the news a lot lately, and I know there's some things because of pending litigation. There's something, you have a criminal case that we'll hopefully be able to talk a little bit about later on. But you've upset some people, you've helped some people. I mean, you've done a lot, but today we're talking about cannabis. You know, we're talking about your role in the city of Pasadena. Last December, your cannabis shop, your dispensary, Collective, Golden State, was raided by Pasadena Police Department. How did that impact you, your employees, when a SWAT team comes in with armed and take people to jail? How did that affect you?
Well, we were encouraged, I felt, by the city, and I feel really disappointed that a civil land use disagreement turned into a potential criminal matter. I really feel that I was looking at my employees wholeheartedly when I told them that we had no fear of any form of raid. We were told by the police that we were not a target, that they knew we were doing it right, and there was a difference between bad operators and others, and they suggested that I continue with my efforts. We actually received a phone call 20 minutes prior to the raid from a resident notifying us that there was a SWAT team packing up and suiting up and getting ready for what they felt was a raid of our facility. We've had a lot of support from our community. We are next door to the Chamber of Commerce. We have supported them, they have supported us. We are a member of multiple associations and really felt that we were trying to shine a golden standard in a progressive city that could become the model for other cities. It breaks my heart that the city chose to send 14 officers into our facility with a Bearcat and to really humiliate the staff, which had a desire to unionize.
I mean, how's that affected, like, your employees' livelihood? How has that affected your future?
Well, extremely. The impacts are immense. We were a nonprofit medical collective, and we were under what we felt were the collective protection model, which sunsetted January 9th of 2019.
Now, for those that may not understand the difference between medical versus recreational, and even the coexistence, your shop was exclusively medical.
Exclusively medical.
Okay.
We incorporated in 2012. We began operations in 2014. We turned down 50, 60 people a day in person, and we had 20, 30 calls a day for individuals that were interested in adult use cannabis. We were exclusive medical. We felt that we were helping provide access of not your typical smokables, but your dosable medicines to individuals that now, other than us, are really heavily impacted by the fact of the matter is, it's easy for individuals to get their adult use cannabis. It's not as easy for the real medical patients to get their dosable medicines. And our employees are now facing criminal citations while misdemeanors can preclude them from operating in this industry. While I feel that I cannot touch on the specifics of the litigation, I feel that they are unfair, unjust, and I really was in a position of a strong desire to work with the city, to find a settlement, to find a resolution. And I have never wanted to be a thorn in anyone's side, and I only wanted to operate professionally.
But what do you say to those who said that you guys were operating illegally? In fact, all of the cannabis shops technically are open illegally? I mean, was it like you're flaunting at the
Well,
law?
I think that there's a distinction that's not being recognized. In 2016, there was a ban placed, and we were operating prior to that ban. In fact, in 2014, we raised an issue of a Brown Act violation and improper certification of the initial ban, which was on marijuana dispensaries, not specifically medical cannabis collectives, cultivation projects. And we felt that when the initial ban came, we were to be grandfathered. And subsequently, when there was an ordinance that was pushed to shut off the utilities of cannabis dispensaries, within 30 days, there were 13,000 signatures collected to keep those local shops open.
But why weren't, kind of where we are now, why aren't other shops being closed down?
Well, I believe that they are being closed down. I believe that there is enforcement actively being progressed in the city. I think that they did not differentiate the initial medicinal collectives to the forthcoming adult use dispensaries. But to that coin, if you look at the history, in 1996, Pasadena voters voted on a statewide initiative for medical cannabis. 20 years later, in 2016, adult use was approved. So it was never a matter of if, it was a matter of when. And I feel really that I was actively led towards putting forth an initiative. I believe that we went and we polled the community and we took forward the steps to reach out to individual groups, associations, individuals, and really get a clear understanding of what their desires were in the community. Cannabis is something that, if done properly, is a betterment to a block. It is not a negative impact. We have been really lucky to have amazing neighbors at Golden State Collective, and we were lucky enough to be a part of the association of our neighbors, and we were lucky enough to be next to the Chamber of Commerce, where they really got to see how we operated. And we really saw that we could be a model in a really progressive city.
I want to talk about that model too. Let me check in real quick. You're watching The Conversation Live. The Conversation Live focuses on social justice, restorative justice, inclusion, and equality. My guest today is Shaun Szameit, and we're unpacking his story. He's the owner of the now shuttered Golden Gate Collective, and found himself in a little bit of a issue with both a civil case as well as a criminal case as a result of operating his cannabis business. Shaun, what's next for you? I mean, where do you go from here?
I have a strong desire to come to a resolution with the city of Pasadena. Mm-hmm. I really feel that cannabis has an amazing opportunity to better many aspects in the city, and I feel that it's not properly being addressed. I feel that the workability of the ordinance and the regulations were not fully understood, and that's why I think it's beautiful, the fact that council can amend at their discretion, because this is a working model. Right?
Because the language says specifically that shops that have been open, yes, quote, illegally, yes, unlicensed, yes, are disqualified from entering, for even applying.
Only if you were operating in the city of Pasadena.
Only if you were operating in the city.
So if you were operating in
yes,
another city, you
mm-hmm,
would still qualify. And the issue with that is 750 points of the application, I believe, of the 1,400 are on experience. So half of the weight is on the 2 years of regulated business, but you were not required to be a regulated business to apply. However, if you had the experience, you would score higher. But there was not an inclusion of Pasadena individuals who really were all brushed with the same broom and not really understood as to their operations and what they were doing for the community. This really isn't about me, it's about an industry, and there's some good people in this community, and there are some good operators that really do care, mm-hmm, about the residents, and I think it's unfortunate that now you have over 100 applicants that have now reached out to organizations and now are attempting to give to the community in order to put that on their application to score points.
And those were that you were giving back.
Very much so.
From the very beginning.
Not just with money, but also with our time. You know, we have personally made lunches and turned them into the Union Station Homeless Services Center for their Saturday, for the Saturday lunches. We have contributed to Pasadena Organizing for Progress. We have contributed to the Southern California Women's Health Expo. We have contributed to Friends in Deeds, sponsored the Mayor's Interfaith Breakfast, the Man Cave. Mm-hmm. We have done everything we could, because I started going to council meetings about 3 years ago, and it's a little embarrassing to say that if I'm not at the meeting, my earbuds are in my ear and I'm listening to KPAS Live, because I really care about everything that's going on. And I've really tried to get a dialogue going with different groups to really have them understand how we're operating and what we are about. Because there's a bridge that, if created, is really valuable. We're talking about a community that over 2/3 of the residents voted yes for this. There have been over 20,000 signatures in 2 efforts collected specifically for this.
Well, one of the things I find most compelling when you, I too, if I'm not at the council meeting, find myself at 6:30 on Monday night watching a real reality show.
Yeah.
But when you hear residents, customers, patients, talk about the hardships, talk about the desire not to be on opioids,
Yes.
and talk about the more positive aspects of cannabis. And they don't typically fit the stereotypical stoner, right? They look like your neighbor.
Yes.
They look like your church member.
Mm-hmm.
They look like someone that you engage in the community.
It's time for the normalization of cannabis.
I would have to agree with you there, but again, I know there's a new initiative
Yes.
to try to grandfather some of the existing cannabis
non-offending
shops,
operators.
non-offending
Yes.
operator. In effect, if you're convicted, you're excluded from that.
Well, if you read the language, is a conviction in 2018. So therefore, I was not convicted of anything, and I do not feel that I will be convicted of any wrongdoings. Beyond that, I don't want to get into the specifics
Sure.
per se. However, we were, once again, a medical-only facility that saw at least 1/3 of the members of the other operating dispensaries in the city.
So if I'm hearing you weren't a cash grab.
Not by any means.
Mm-hmm.
We made it a point to give back most of our proceeds, and we did a lot of community-oriented activities, and our goal wasn't the short-term profit. We foregoed on very, very
So you weren't the
unregulated
pop-up model. I mean, you weren't
By
the
no
shop.
means.
You were pretty much hiding in plain sight. I mean, you're
And if you really dive into the operators, not all use their own name in their applications, so the ban does not really apply across the board. And I don't want that to get misconstrued, because I actually believe in any good operator that wanted to give back to the community and actually wanted to run a good business for their livelihood. So it's an unfortunate situation that we're at a position where within the next 2 months there will be scores given to outside entities who want to operate large corporate cannabis businesses in this community. And
why is it important to keep the mom and pop, if you will, in this industry?
well, there's 8 to 10 months before any of them become operational.
Mm-hmm.
What happens to the medical patients that need access now? Why do the residents of Pasadena receive their cannabis from deliveries from outside cities, per Pasadena law, where the other cities are taking the tax benefits? Why is that accepted, but not the ability to have fulfillment in your own community?
Well, let me check in real quick. You're watching The Conversation Live. Conversation Live focuses on social justice, restorative justice, inclusion, and equality. Today, my guest is Shaun Szameit, who is the owner of the now shuttered Golden State Collective. And Shaun, so we're talking about access, right? And people having the ability to get medication and or recreational, whichever their choice is. But when you look at how the zoning works, you know, and then you go back to these multiple shops that are open in the city that, quote, are illegally open, not all of them would fit within the zoning areas that they're currently at. So how do we solve that problem? Because
well, it would appear that there's a de facto ban based on land use regulations, because if the ordinance were to allow 6 dispensaries, the current setbacks, which are very much more extreme than other jurisdictions, preclude the ability for there to be more than 3 operators in the community. I do believe...
I mean, it's 600 feet from residential areas, and we can talk about that, away from K through 12, as well as libraries, parks, substance abuse centers.
Yes.
And I know in some other cities, they, like where your shop was located, you know, it's more mixed use, it's more apartments and commercial.
Yeah, and there actually aren't there's no apartments on our street. However, probably 300, 400 feet away, you'll get into multifamily facilities. But I couldn't think of a better location than Mentor. Personally, we have an amazing relationship with the other businesses on the block. We're a member of the association, and we interact with each other on a daily basis. I think that Pasadena took a conservative approach, and you can respect aspects of that, because those setbacks can be amended. I really think that this quickly turned into a personal issue, and that's highly regrettable.
What do you think made it personal? I mean, why you? What have you done? I stopped short of saying being targeted, you know, because there was some semblance of cooperation. I am aware that you were, you know, consulting with the city, not in a consulting capacity, but working in
Invited
a good faith,
on multiple occasions,
in good faith effort
to review with planning staff and city management workability ordinances, merit-based applications, showed them tax structures and scores, ways to score applicants, also the difference between the various operations, difference between cultivation and retail, manufacturing versus lab testing. I felt very much encouraged to pursue this. I really felt non-offending operators were going to be given a shot.
I mean, but why do you, I'm going to say it, you're not, these aren't your words, but it seems like you were targeted for some reason. And do you have any idea why that was the case, considering you were working closely?
You know, I wouldn't know where to start, and I don't think that that's a road that I have any desire to go down at this point. I want to work in the industry I've devoted my life to. I want to be a compliant, good faith operator, and I want to provide for my family. I have a beautiful daughter who turns 3 on April 5th, and she's going to be enrolling into Pasadena schools. And our initiative advised 30% of the tax base to go directly to Pasadena public schools. Our initiative did not take away from the Pasadena's ability to create regulations back in 2018. It just had them acknowledge the previous good standing operators who were there prior to their commercial ban. It strikes a question of how, when there was a ban in place, and then they chose after the utility ordinance shut off being repealed to go with another ban. However, at the same time, they grandfathered an entity, Encore Labs. That is a commercial cannabis business, and I just want to have the same afforded opportunity that they've had. I don't think civil matters should have ever jumped into a criminal realm. And I just think that if everyone could take a step back and look at the best in a go forward, I really have a strong desire to go down that path.
Should the city, should there be a moratorium on them issuing license in this next round until they've had an opportunity to really examine if or revisit not the legislation, but the ordinance that would restrict it to 6?
That would create a lot of undue harm to interested applicants. And I feel that there's room for more than those 3 to 6 applicants. And I really feel that the initiative will pass. There's 180 days to collect the roughly 8,500 signatures required. We only had a pathway of 30 days prior, and we couldn't force a special election in 2018. This jumps into another interesting aspect. In 2018, we submitted an initiative. As of 2018, you cannot force a special election. Before, if you collected 15% of the registered voters, you would be given a special election within, I believe, 85 days. Now, regardless of your collection percentage, 10% or greater, you can only go to the next regularly scheduled election. So with roughly a week or two, possibly a couple days more, of the deadline for the city to bring upon a special election, the city chose to file for a fiscal emergency and introduced what staff coined a break-even proposition to regulate cannabis. So without us being afforded the ability to get onto that initiative, they chose to get ahead of our initiative in a way that we weren't even allowed to compete. And for it to be a fiscal emergency for a break-even proposition, and then to follow subsequently with the general election raising the sales tax, it just doesn't make sense. Their tax collections were 20 or 30% lower than the initiative submitted by the people. And this is really about the residents, not me, and the cannabis industry. I've just become a vessel.
Let me check in. You're watching The Conversation Live. The Conversation Live focuses on social justice, restorative justice, inclusion, and equality. My guest today is Shaun Szameit, and he is the owner of the now shuttered Golden State Collective. And we're just unpacking his story and learning a little bit more about the process that he has gone through. Shaun, we're just about up on the time, so I want to make sure that we are able to cover a few things.
Of course.
In terms of, I know you have a lawsuit against the city. Do you care to comment on that?
The challenge was regarding the language that disallowed the ability to apply. I would love to settle that lawsuit in a global resolution. I have no interest in fighting with the city. I want to operate a good business that is accepted and welcomed in the community.
Okay, your criminal case, you expect to prevail in that?
The criminal case is a mirror of the civil issues, and I think, while I can't speak on it, it was unfortunate, unnecessary, and I don't believe it'll push much further.
Did you call for the Victor Gordo recall? Did you organize that?
There were, while I cannot speak on specifics, various groups. I went around looking to see what issues that everyone was having in the community, and I thought I saw a trend of issues, and I really feel that I was used in a way to push others' agendas, and I think I was advised improperly, and I think that the last thing this needs to happen is become personal. And I don't believe anyone deserves any form of retribution. I pray that there's no political retribution on my side. And I look forward to an amicable resolution, and I do not want to have a part of anything that is divisive in the community. I want time to be spent bettering the community, and there's no value in engaging in anything other than that.
Okay. And were you implying anything, or as Councilmember Gordo has interpreted, that you were, offering something of value when you said
any way, shape, or form? My only response to that would be I have had a dialogue with many of the elected officials in the city, and I don't believe that any one of them would get that impression.
Off the record, we won't say who, but I understand some have even visited your shop.
Very much so, and I do believe that there was an issue that I was caught in the middle of, whereas the regulations did not allow them to have me operating, and they chose not to acknowledge me prior to adoption. And I would have never opened in a banned city, and I only wanted my case to be heard. I didn't want for these years to go by without any resolution for it to end that way. But the thing is the city knew that we were closing on December 31st because we would no longer have collective protections. We had no desire to thumb our nose. We did not want to be an illegal operation. We were not adult use. We stayed medical, and I really felt that I was doing a good thing. I thought I was being a model.
We're gonna leave it right there, Shaun. We gotta get ready to get out of here. We're right up on the time. I do appreciate you, sitting down and talking with me. There's some things I wanted to ask you, but I know we just couldn't talk about because of your pending litigation. But again, I wish you the very best of success.
Thank you.
I wish you success in terms of what you're aiming to do for the cannabis industry, consumers and patients in this footprint. Like I said, we're just about a few seconds before we gotta get out of here. You're watching The Conversation Live. I'm your host, James Farr. The Conversation Live focuses on social justice, restorative justice, inclusion, and equality. Join us here next week, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Facebook Live at theconversation.live. My guest will be Pasadena School District Board member Michelle Richardson Bailey, as well as legendary KJLH radio announcer and Pasadena educator Roland Bynum. We're going to talk education and Black excellence. Until we have another opportunity to speak with you, goodbye. Agape. The Conversation Live is brought to you by